Welcome to Premiere number 8 of the Introduction to Meditation and the Introduction to Your Internal Map of Reality. Tonight's session is on March 16th, 2022. And we are moving quickly to the equinox next week, so that should be interesting. Hopefully, some of you will do a meditation on those days of the equinox. But tonight, we will be covering the following 6 areas. And as normal, we're following a pretty similar agenda. I mix a few things up, but just so you know what's coming forward, we're going to do our 1-minute meditation as normal. And remember, regard this as a practice for longer meditations. Then after that, we'll go into part 3 of session 5 of the Introduction to Meditation, Brainwave Frequencies, or Frequencies of the Brain. This is the wrap-up of it, and we'll be going into specific frequency ranges and their physiological impact. Something you should know if you're going to be meditating longer than a few minutes. Then we'll do a guided meditation. I switched it up. We're going to be doing the body, walking through the body meditation. We did that one other time, and so we'll come back to that. And this is a good one to practice observing without interfering. So you be observing the body and be a neutral observer. Then after that, we'll go into the Internal Map of Reality, Session 5, Part 2 of the Timeline. And out of that, there'll be an exercise 11, a short video explaining or discussing that exercise. These exercises are getting a little bit more challenging, and you will need to do them with pencil and paper, and you may need to practice them several times. I do to this day, and I've been doing this for over a decade. Now, to wrap it up, there'll be a bonus topic, first in what I think might be a series on bilateral movement, and we'll actually be learning how to do the first movement of a Tai Chi Qi Kung movement for your health. Well, that's it. So we're going to start now with the 1-minute meditation. And remember that when you're doing this 1-minute meditation, you can just sit quietly, or you can practice the detachment. The detachment is when you focus on something like a spot on the wall, or with your eyes closed, you might see that little fuzzy dot from a little light reflection from your optic nerve. So you focus on those things. And then at some point when you get distracted by a thought and you find you're thinking of something else, I like to think of it as going off into a dream. You start dreaming about what you're going to be doing later or what you did yesterday, but in some way you're not attending to the spot on the wall or with your eyes closed, the fuzzy dot. The moment you realize this, and this is the magical moment when you wake up and you realize, oh, I'm no longer focusing or attending to what I had set out to attend to. So then you politely disconnect from whatever it is you had set as your goal to watch and go back to it. Okay? It's very important that you do it very calmly and very gently. We'll be talking about this, why this attitude, this approach is very important. Okay? So let's do that. So we will now do the 1-minute meditation. Welcome to Introduction to Meditation, Session 5, Part 3, Frequencies of the Brain. And we'll be looking at now some specific measurements of the brainwave frequencies. Up until now, we've been talking about what a frequency is and how that relates to our three-body system, our physical, our energetic body, and our spiritual body, just to get you thinking in those terms. So now what we'll be doing is we'll actually be going into the details of these frequencies. So here is a chart, an EEG tracing chart, and it's showing you what these 4 bandwidths, remember I mentioned the beta, the alpha, the theta, and delta. So what are some things you notice? That the beta is the fastest frequency, and it's ranging from 13 to 30 beats or cycles per second. Remember, each cycle is a complete 360 completion of the circle, going from A, coming back to A. So it's doing this between 13 and 30 times per second. So that's quite a bit. So if you try to do something like try to count to 10 in 1 second, it's very, very hard. And then the next level down is alpha, is 7 to 13 beats per second. Then down to theta, 3 to 7 beats per second. And finally, the very, very slow moving delta, half a beat per second to 3 to 4 beats per second. Now, the thing that I'd like you to notice here, is, there's an asterisk at the bottom, is the amplitude. Is that the slower the frequency, the bigger the amplitude, which indicates power, right? If you are a surfer, you know that the little waves aren't really going to do something, but it's the slow-moving, bigger waves that actually a surfer would look for. And of course, the waves, the really big ones that come in from the deep ocean, may travel many miles, but they move very slowly, but they accumulate very tremendous height and power. So something to think about, that one reason to want to slow down your brainwave frequencies is that as you go into slower, deeper frequencies, you gain more power, more electrical energy, more electrical power. This is sometimes called amperage, or in this case, amplitude. So these 4 stages are quite interesting. And I mentioned that slow stage at the bottom, the delta stage. It is actually the stage in which we call stage 4. And people, when they're in the delta sleep, are sometimes very hard to wake up. You know, there can be noises will go on. And in some people, it's a part of their left of sleep when they might do some sleepwalking. And in children, it's quite often where there could be bedwetting. You're so sleepy that you kind of lose track of your physical abilities. In fact, when you are in delta stage 4 deep sleep, you can't move. You're basically immovable. So one trick to see how deep into sleep someone is to take something like a feather and to just touch the person's hand or their arm or their face. If they are in stage 4, they might move a little bit, but they won't move to swat the little fly. So mosquitoes typically would wait until people are in deep sleep in delta before they would go on and attack them. So if you're in the woods camping, note that it's delta, that when the mosquitoes will come to get you. Now, in stage 4 is also where people might experience something called night terrors. And I've had some people say to me that they experienced the feeling where they would wake up, but they couldn't move. And this is quite terrifying for some people. You have these night terrors, and you might want to be able to get up, but you can't. You can't speak. You can't do anything. Now, this is nothing to be too alarmed about. It's normal that when you're in deep sleep, your body is not responding to your conscious commands. You're in pure autonomic stage. When you just relax and sit there, you will eventually come out of your deep sleep and come out of the deep delta. Now, these stages of deep delta normally only last about 30 minutes. And then you cycle out and you cycle back up through the frequencies, and then you'll go down. And as it says here in the bottom here, you tend to go through the stages 2, 3, and 4 during the night. The important thing to note here is that if you don't go into stage 4, you may experience some health problems. You need to go into stage 4. We're going to talk about that here in a second. So there's something I had mentioned earlier in part 1 called binaural beats. So if you want to slow down the frequencies, what you would do, in one ear, you would play a tone, say at 315 hertz or beats per second. And then in the other ear, you would play a tone at 325 hertz per second or beats per second. Hertz, HZ, stands for frequencies per second, beats per second. Now what happens, these two frequencies, one in the left ear, one in the right ear, are balanced by the brain. So if you subtract the left from the right, you get 10 hertz, right? So I used to try these binaural beat things, and they're quite effective, but you have to do them with headphones. And what it does is it actually lowers the frequency of the brain. So here's an example of someone using binaural beats. And you can see that the level of activity is measured here in orange and yellow. It is pretty low here in terms of their frequencies. And you can see the hertz or the beats per second on the bottom here going from 0 beats to 20 hertz. And what they wanted was to get someone to be in train to the 10 hertz per second. So after 6 minutes of listening to the tape, you could see the spike here at the 10 beats per second. They were able to increase the amount of energy the person was putting into at that frequency. So why is this important? Well, we look at neural activity, and you can see here that these brainwave activity scans, the blue indicating less blood flow and the red indicating high blood flow. And let's look at these in terms of the brainwave frequencies. On the top, you see the beta, which is the fastest frequency. And you can see here at the high beta end range, there's a lot of red in the front cortex and a lot of yellow. And then as the person slows down and goes into beta, there's more cooling of the brain, and the main activity still in the front of the cerebral cortex. Then when they get into alpha, now alpha is the sweet spot that people can get into quite easily. Alpha occurs whenever you close your eyes. Now, if you've been doing the 1-minute meditation and you've been doing the guided meditations, you probably experienced alpha quite readily. And notice here that in alpha, the brain is very calm. There's not a lot of red energy. It's just very calm all over. So it's a very nice, calming state. But something else happens, very interesting. So when you slow the brain down and you go into theta, which is even lower, notice that the brain activity peaks up again. But also notice that the brain activity is more homogeneously spread across the whole brain. So at the very high frequency, it's mainly in the front of the brain, so in high beta, and then in theta, which is the activity where people normally experience dreaming, the frequency, the blood flow is increased again. And then finally down in delta, you can see that the brain waves have slowed down a bit, but it's still very, very active. So the neural activity is active at whatever stage you're in. So if you're in high beta, it's very active. And when you're in low delta, which is like around 1 beat per second, it's still active. So the important note here is that this correlates to meditation. As you slow down your meditation, when you go through alpha, you will have a calming sensation. So see that nice and calm blue. But as you go deeper, you will notice then an increase in activity. So this is why when you're meditating, you will begin to get a lot of activity. You might have a lot of self-dialogue and whatever, okay? And then as you go down into delta, it's still a tremendous amount of activity. So here's what's happening. So let's break these down. They break them down into 10 levels. You can do this any way you want, but the main thing to look at is the second column here, the frequencies, starting at 10 beats per second, going down to 1 beat per second at the very bottom. So between 8 and 10 is your alpha frequency. They didn't do the beta ones, which would be higher, up around 13 plus. That's your awakened state. So this is looking at people who are meditating, starting at alpha. So when you start to do the relaxation and the frequencies, and this is associated with pre-sleep or drowsiness. So this is why when people begin to do a meditation, they might begin to feel like they're getting sleepy and getting almost like in a trance-like state. But this doesn't last so long. So when your brainwave frequencies start to slow down even more, so I would say after about 10 minutes or so of meditating, you begin to slip down into the theta range, which is from 7 down to 4 beats per second. And notice here that they say that in the theta you begin to dream, and you have a meditation with vivid imagery. So this is why sometimes when people are meditating, they have visions and they see things, but be aware, they are only dreaming. And it's enjoy the dream, but don't get fixated on it. Remember to detach from the dream and come back to your meditation. So you can dream in theta. Notice though on the far right column, there's something that begins to happen. You begin to release serotonin and melatonin, and you decrease your cholesterol in the bloodstream, which is very, very good for the heart. There's the DHEA hormones that are released. Again, very, very healing. So if you just practice meditating long enough to get into theta, you will actually begin the healing process. Now, here's the big one that I think is important. If you meditate longer, I would say it would take you about 15, 20 minutes to about a half an hour of meditating very quietly, you will slip into delta, which is very, very low beats, 1 to 3 beats per second, and even slower. But something really amazing happens in this very slow frequency is that you start to produce a growth hormone, and it stimulates your immune system. You need to go into this delta state frequently. Now, if you are someone who's not getting proper sleep, not able to get full 8 hours sleep in, whatever, if you meditate during the day, you can take yourself down into delta to get this needed delta sleep period. And this is very, very, very rewarding. Now, the reason I wanted to point this out, that for newcomers in meditating, slipping between these 3 stages can be a bit of a trap. When People may want to stay in alpha, but alpha is just the introductory phase. Remember that it's the calm phase. Then you go slower, you get into a more energetic phase, and you begin to dream, and you begin to have imagery, either real, visual, or sounds, or whatever. Some people like hear things. It's okay. It's just a dream. But this will pass, and you go down even deeper into delta. Now, here's an important thing. If you are sitting longer than 20, 30 minutes, your body will go into delta, and you will not be able to move your body freely. Your body will begin to become almost numb. It might feel as if it's frozen or locked. It isn't. The moment you open your eyes and you begin to wiggle your toes, your network of frequencies will begin to go up, and you will regain mobility of your legs and arms. I mention this because when you meditate for longer periods and you start to come out of your meditation, do it very, very slowly. Start by just wiggling your toes very, very slowly. And if you find that you're numb, your legs and hands and legs are a little bit numb, don't be alarmed. Just, continue to sit there slowly, slowly, slowly. Open your legs up. Slowly open your arms and adjust your body. And you might even very slowly change from a sitting position to a laying position. Perfectly okay. But just remember that you've been in deep delta, and your body tends to lock and become inaccessible to your conscious mind. So this is the deepest level of meditation that you can go into. I want to mention this. Now, you probably won't go there on your first meditations. This will happen over time. But I want you to be aware that when you've been meditating longer from 10, 15, 20 minutes, a half hour or longer, and you decide it's time to come out of it, do it very, very slowly and allow your body a chance to go up into the higher frequencies naturally. This is connected to the frequencies that you have heard about for chakras. Here they're using different bandwidth of frequencies that are associated with colors. But what I want you to note is that these slower frequencies are associated with the lower areas of your chakra, starting with your root chakra, going to your stomach, and then your heart, and then up around your thymus, and up around your third eye, and then your crown chakra. These don't match up 100% with the four bands that I was mentioning earlier, right, with the alpha, theta, and delta. But within there is a correlation between these. Now, the reason I mention this is that these chakras are connected to your major endocrine glands. So in each of these locations here where there are the colors of the chakra, there's located one of your major endocrine glands. Now, one thing that I do is suggest that when you're doing these longer meditations, you can do them as in the bottom right here. You can do them sitting in the chair, and this is how I personally practice my meditation. But you can do them at night. At night, I sometimes sleep like this with my knees up and my hands resting in my hips and my head slightly propped up. And this allows my spine to just open up slowly. And I just meditate in this position. Or you can take the position here called the prone position, where you're flat on your back, very little pillow, just a small pillow under your head, your arms by your side. And this position is very great for just, if you want to meditate in this position, this is fantastic. And it's okay if you fall asleep in this position. So remember, when you're doing the traditional meditation, you will very slowly begin to drop down in frequencies from your beta, day-to-day awakening. The moment you close your eyes, you'll begin to slip into alpha. Then you'll slow down even more into theta. And eventually you'll be able to get down into delta. And delta is where all of the magical healing takes place. So practice it, take your time with it, and enjoy. So we'll be going now on to the next segment, which is called the 3 realms, and that will be at our next session on next Wednesday. Okay, we're going to do a guided meditation. So just sit comfortably in your chair, let your eyes close, and just listen to my voice. We're going to walk through your body. I'm going to mention a part of your body, and what I'd like you to do is just take your awareness there. Don't do anything, just go there in your mind and observe that part of your body. I'm going to start with your feet. Take your awareness to your feet, the soles of your feet, your toes, your ankles, tops of your feet, and even inside your foot. Take all your awareness to your feet. Still not moving or doing anything, take your awareness in both legs from your ankles to your knees. Just move your mind's eye and focus in on the area from your ankles to your knees, calves, shin, skin. Okay, good. Now we're going to move your attention from your knees in both legs to your hips. From your knees to your hips. Become totally aware of that area. We're going to keep moving our attention now from your hips to your ribs, your stomach area, your lower back, your sides, the whole abdominal area, from your hips to your ribs. You might be aware of your stomach moving in and out as you breathe. But again, just take your attention there. Now we'll move up to your rib cage, from your diaphragm up to your shoulders, your sides of your ribs, your chest, your upper back. And again, you might be aware of your lungs, you might be aware of your heart. Just become totally aware of that area. And again, without changing anything, we're just moving your attention, move to your hands. Become totally aware of your palms of your hands, your fingers, tops of your hands, the sides. Good. We're going to move now from your wrists to your elbows. Just your attention. Leave everything else the way it is. From your wrists to your elbows. Again, in both arms, we're going to move now and focus in on the area from your elbows to your shoulders. Just the area from your elbows to your shoulders. Let your attention now go to your shoulders, between your shoulder and your neck. Along your neck to the front of your neck and the back of your neck and the sides. Your attention now goes up to your chin and the cheeks and around your mouth. And then around your nose and eyes. And your forehead and your eyebrows. Let your attention now move around to the sides of your head, your temples, and down to your ears, and around to the back of your head. Your attention now goes up to the very top of your head, right to the very crown of your head. Just focus on the very top of your head. Now, to end this little meditation, what I'd like you to do is to focus on your entire body, all together from your toes right to the top of your head, to the tips of your fingers. Your body all in one piece, comfortably sitting there. And at any time you feel like it, you can just let your eyes gently open. Hello and welcome to the Internal Map of Reality, Session 5, Part 2, Your Timeline Filters. And we're going to pick up from where we left off from the last session, and we'll be going deeper into our filters. Now, the timeline is expansive, and as we indicated, here one example being that depending on how you view, how you're oriented to your timeline, that may affect whether you perceive things or whether you judge things. So your exercise was, in fact, to identify how you see if it matched up. In fact, true. It may not be true for everyone. So this would be an interesting little experiment that we can do, and you can then do it for others. So what we found out with the direction finder is that the way you are processing the information on your timeline may, in fact, have other implications for the way you process information in general. The way I like to think of it is that if I am very associated with my timeline and I feel that it's running through me, that I am physically facing my future, it's directly in front of me, and my past is directly behind me. And in a sense, I am perceiving or feeling I'm more intact, in touch with my timeline. I become more sensitive, more of a perceiver, as opposed to someone who is looking at the timeline as something laid out in front of them like a display in a cabinet with the past, the present, and the future all visible in front of them, disassociated, so you can be easier to judge. But there are other interesting filters or ways the timeline can filter our day-to-day reality. And we're just going to review a few of them here. The frequency counter. Many different approaches to the frequency counter. The thing is that the three big ones is if something has never happened before, so a frequency of 0. If something has happened only once, frequency counter of 1. Or something has happened before or many times. So you may find that people who procrastinate will use the frequency counter and saying, oh, they've never done that before, so I don't want to do that again, a way of procrastinating. Or the person may say, oh, no, I've done that once before, I don't want to do that again. Or the procrastinator might say, oh, I've done that too many times, we do it every time, I don't want to do that anymore. The reverse of that is true as well. That someone may say, oh, I've never done that before, I would love to do that. Or I've done it once, that means I can do it again, I would like to repeat it. Or it's happened many, many times, I can do this, it's like water falling off a duck's back, love to do it again, no problem, let's do it. So there's no right or wrong or good or bad way of processing the never happened once, or happened before, but it's something to be aware of. Why? Because people who have compulsive behaviors may be triggered by one of those three levels. Let me give you an example. People who are heavily triggered by the frequency counter of 0 may become very, very evasive and very nervous when being asked to do something that they've never done. So this frequency counter is just something to be observed of, because it tends to radiate, just like with the direction filter, all right? if the way you view the never happened, happened once, or happened frequently can affect the way you deal with larger aspects of your life. Now, I always use the example of asking someone for something simple, like if you're sitting down for dinner, you ask them, could you please pass the pepper? And notice that some people will do it right away. Some people will take asking them twice, other people 3 times. So this frequency counter is very important. Then you can then look at whether or not this is true for bigger things in their life. Now, if we get to situations where people need to overcome a major limitation, something that's very, very unresourceful, and you want either you or someone you love to be able to conquer a fear or conquer some aspect of their personality that's really, really limiting them. This is where this frequency counter comes in. For some people, you only need to do something once and then they're okay. I think of my friend who had the fear of heights, and all she needed to do was to take the process, which we'll be talking about later on, the way of cleansing your root cause event. Once that root cause event was cleansed, she only needed to go up in that high-rise building in Las Vegas and do the bungee cord jump off the building. Once she did that, she was good to go. She never again looked back and had the fear of heights. Other people, you have to do things frequently, right? And if you are someone who will never do something, there'll never be that right time, as in the quote from Napoleon Hill, there'll never be that right time for you to do something. Don't wait for that right time. So knowing where you fit in this range of frequency counters can have major implications in other things in your life. Pay attention to whether you avoid things that you've never done before, avoid things that you've only done once, or avoid things that you do frequently. Having the flexibility to react to all of those is important. You need to be able to do things that you've never done before. This is the discovery thing. So if you have this frequency counter issue where you avoid things that you've never done before, this can have a huge impact on your ability to grow and change, because there are many things that we've never done before. So that opens up the world of possibilities. So we'll be talking again about the frequency counter filter in your timeline and looking at other ways that it can be both used in a positive way and how you can deal with compulsive issues in your life. The other way the timeline can play, and it's kind of related to the frequency counter, is what does it take to convince someone? What number of times do you have to do to convince someone? Or do you have to use a different number of modes? Do you have to say something to them verbally? Do you have to describe it as a picture and an image visually? Do you have to give them a tactile feeling to be able to do something? Some people need to be able to either physically touch something or have the image of actually physically manipulating something before they are convinced to do something. Other people require an interval, so they will be faced with having to maybe make a change or do something, but then they need a period of time, a set period of time between their first recognizing that they need to do something and the second request. So how many times do they have to be approached on something? How many different modes and what modes do they need to hear it in? And is there an interval, a specific interval? Is it a minute later, an hour later, a day later, a week later. When I was involved in doing large end scale computer sales, it was quite often that the salesperson would ask for the order a number of different ways. Not just say, well, would you like to purchase this computer? They would then have to rephrase it as, do you think that your organization could use this computer? And then you could rephrase it as, do you think your budget will be able to support the purchase of this computer? And then the interval, you might want to think, well, you tell you what, let's leave it like this for now, and I'll come back and we'll arrange another meeting. What would be a good time for you? And they'll tell you, oh, well, come by tomorrow or come by next week, or, oh, we'll have to be at the next budget turn, in 3 months or whatever. And then notice that the person will tell you what mode they want to hear the next convincer statement in. So if you did a thing with using the mode of visual, and you said, can you see your organization purchasing this equipment? And the person will say, well, I don't have a good feeling that they would want to purchase it now. Then you can come back and you say, well, what things do you think we can do to give them a better appreciation of how it would actually work in their organization? So you can come back and say, well, what can you physically do? What can we, how can we manipulate the situation such that your decision-making team can feel good about purchasing? So you'll actually get clues in the language. I often believe that when people speak, they will speak in terms of the verbs that relate to their primary mode of thinking. So the convincer is very important, not only for getting others to do things, but in terms of convincing yourself that something is right. Pay attention for how you come at being convinced of something. Now, there is a reality that there are people who just cannot be convinced of stuff. As soon as they feel that they are being talked to in a way to try to get them to change their mind, they will not. Once they made up their mind, that's it. And there are others that are more easier to convince. The key here is with the convincer is that if you look at something simple that requires to convince you or someone, it's also applicable for the more complex things in their lives or in their situations. For some people, it's very difficult to reverse a decision. So if you're trying to get someone to reverse their conclusion, it may be a battle that you're not going to win. You might be better off to construct a whole different scenario where you don't directly challenge their belief. And then finally, there's an unexplained component here. If you ask someone, why did you make that decision? They may be able to tell you, and then they may shrug their shoulders and say something like, oh, I don't know, I just didn't feel like I wanted to do whatever it was. The unexplained shrugging shoulders, oh, I just don't know, or a gut feeling or something like that. This tells you right away that there's a big subconscious component here. It also tells you that this person, including yourself, may be easily manipulated if you are unaware of what things influence you to make decisions. If you don't know, then that means that there's variables or aspects out there that you're not aware of, that you can't really see. They're filtered out of your filtered reality that can affect you, that can affect how you make decisions. So know why you are convinced to do something, and if you don't, you may want to do some meditation. Think about what it is that made you decide to do something or not to do something. In other words, understand what things motivate you. Now, we'll be getting into this later on when we do strategies for motivation. And this is an example, sort of precursor, giving an idea that it has to do with modes of thinking. Something now that I see a lot, in myself and with other people, that as you age, as you move along your personal timeline, you have set goals, or you have set keystone or markers along your timeline to indicate when you can and cannot do things. The sort of limiters, brackets. Now, very resourceful, flexible people have a very broad bracket, and they can do things that they could do when they were a child, and they can do things that they can consider are more for a senior or an adult. You have access to the full range of your abilities. Other people are very restricted and are very centered on their age. And this can be related to where they are in the pecking order of their family. Are they the firstborn, the second, or the oldest? Oh, sorry, the youngest. So firstborn and lastborn tend to have completely different perceptions. The firstborn tends to see that they can do anything, whereas those who were born later on, maybe the lastborn of a larger family, felt the restrictions of being the youngest and always being told by someone older. So your family order has an impact on this particular filter, your timeline filter. And the big one here is the root cause event. Your root cause, your events from the past tend up being major limiters in terms of your present and future behaviors. People, when they're making a decision about what they're going to do today or in the future, will inevitably look back to events in their past that can give them an idea whether or not they're able to do this. It sets their expectations. So one aspect of the limiter filter of your timeline I find interesting is that some people will see themselves as givers and others will see themselves as receivers. Others will see themselves as victims and others will see themselves as rescuers. This has a lot to do with how you perceive your timeline in terms of your abilities. If you are looking ahead in your limiter timeline where you feel the older you are, you have power or control over people who are younger and people who are older. We're going to delve deeper into the limitations that we assign on ourselves with this aspect of their timeline. And we'd like to remove it, wouldn't we? And one way we will be removing it is by neutralizing root cause events. And that will be the major part of our next session. Okay, so the final filter that I like to just talk about briefly is what I call the social binder. What things in your social context are limiting you? And these, again, are stored on your timeline. Things about your social interactions stored in your past will determine what you do in the present and what you will do in the future. Now, one way that you can control the social binder is through power frames. So you can implement, if you can identify that there is some limitation, if you want to be able to do something in your life, and you find that it's difficult or you're being limited, and you can look back and you can see that it's because of your family upbringing or because of your friends, what they call the social controls of your friendships, or if it's something to deal with your employment, past or the present, they can create binders, things that will be limiting you. Now, we've talked about power frames in the past, so what you can do is you can construct power frames to help neutralize any social bindings. I'm just sort of working now to come up with an example of that. I had an opportunity to run my Introduction to Meditation course, and it was only available for employees in this particular university. So employees could take the course for free, but students couldn't. And I had one student approach me and say that she would really like to take the course, but then she realized that it was for employees only. Her reaction was, when she found out that it was for employees only, was to just accept it and go away. My reaction to her was, oh, well, we can find a way around that. And I just simply made her an apprentice, and she came in as a student apprentice helping me with the course. And basically all she had to do was just, give me feedback and participate in the course as an observer. But there's always a way around the rules and regulations from your employment, from your friends, and from your family that set up these rules and regulations that affect your future and affect your present. Power frames, or just looking at it in a resourceful way, can allow you to get around these social binders. Nothing is written in stone. Okay, so your exercise 11 will be to pick one or two of the filters listed below or previously, and to identify them in yourself or in others, and perhaps even identify other ways that you use your timeline as a filter. I will again issue a short video explaining this exercise in more detail. Well, I hope you found that explanation of your timeline filtering of use. And again, I look forward to any questions or comments that you may have. And welcome to this short video on exercise 11, timeline filters. So the purpose of this short video is just to give you some additional guidance in how to move forward with these exercises. And I'll repeat again, doing the exercises is important because it helps to build a practical experience with using some of these techniques. Now, I myself found that for quite a while, I just had to listen to the material, and then I would go back and practice it. So if you haven't been doing the exercises, that's not a big deal. As long as you've been showing interest and following, you will have the opportunity, and we will be reviewing all of these as we go forward and going deeper into them. So today's exercise is called Exploring Your Timeline Filters. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to walk through some of the major filters that I personally identified. You might find different filters which are associated with your timeline. Now, just to repeat what I mean by a filter is a preset set of criteria by which you eliminate or distort your moment-to-moment reality in order to zero in on some specific content. An example being, you may be in a very, very noisy room with all kinds of sounds, but you need to listen for a specific person's voice. And you will be able to distinguish that person's voice in a room full of all kinds of distractions and noises and whatnot, much like the way a mother might be sound asleep, but then the moment her child begins to cry, she wakes up immediately, even though there may have been all kinds of sounds in her bedroom that were louder. So these filters filter out unnecessary or what is deemed unnecessary information and present you with that information your subconscious believes you need. So let's go through some of these filters. And the first one that we've been working on, we did an exercise on it last week, is your direction finder. So the key here is to understand where you physically orient your present. Where do you physically see your present? Directly in front of you, or to one side or the other, or behind? Where physically, if you were going to point to the future, where would you be pointing to? And similarly, if you were to point to the past, where would you be pointing? And then, so that's the beginning of understanding how you orient and plan, whether you're a planner that plans directly in front of you or someone who needs to have things laid out. And there's all kinds of subtleties here that we'll have an opportunity to go through. But your first step is to practice discovering. And also you might notice whether if during the day or during different activities you might change your direction finder. This requires you to pay close attention, but you might have, again, a pad of paper or a written journal where in the morning you might write down, oh, where do I see my future this morning? And then later on the day or the evening, you sit down to update your journal, you might say, well, has the location of my future changed? Now, you can do this by talking to other people. Remember, don't give them too much information when you're asking people about their filters. Just ask them very direct but gentle but easy to follow questions, such as, if you were to point at your future, where would you physically point to? Now, if you give them hints, be sure to give them all the hints, not just one. So you would say, would you point to your front? Would you point to your back? Would you point to either side, left or right? Would you point up or point down? It's important to give them all the options and not just focus on one, because you will be preconditioning them to an answer. Okay, play with that. The next one is the frequency counter. And the key one here is that you can play with yourself, is identify how many times, how you react to things for the first time, the second time, and the third time and more. Remember that there are people who will not do something unless they've done it before. Now, you can quickly do the logic here and say, well, if you're the type of person who doesn't want to do new things, then maybe you're not a very adventurous person. And trying to enter into doing something creative like changing your internal map of reality might be a real challenge if you are one of these first people who never attempts things that are new. However, you might be someone who only does something once. Okay? Try to see where you are. Watch yourself. Make notes in your journal. And then observe other people around you. Right? The next one is the convincer. And this is the one that salespeople really enjoy. How many repeats and in how many modes do you need to hear something before you act and buy or do or whatever it is? And pay attention to yourself. Now, it might be easier to do this with someone else. I just had a flash that if you have a dog or a cat, you might find that they have a convincer number 2. Your dog may not respond to you on the first command. It may take 2, it may take 3, or you may have to combine it with a voice and maybe a physical sound, or maybe even a look or tone. So be observant as to what you need and what other people need to be convinced to act. The next one is the limiter. What things limit you? Look in your life and say, well, I would do this, but. It's the big B-U-T, the big but, not the but that you're sitting on, but the but that limits you. So if you know someone, or if you are a person who has a lot of limits, see how they're identified. Are they associated with the timeline? And a lot of the times they are associated with the timeline either by your chronological age or by your family order. And an interesting one of this chronological aspect, if you're the first person to enter a room versus the last person to enter a room. So if you're going to a meeting and you are the last person to enter the room and sit at the table, how do you feel? As opposed to you being the first person, you walk in, there's no one else in the room, and you sit down and you're the first person to sit at the table for the meeting. Okay? And then, of course, there are the subsequent levels where first, second, third, fourth. But the big one that we will be focusing on and doing some work on is the root cause event. For all limiting behaviors, there is a root cause event that prior to that event, you did not have that limiting behavior. Then after that root cause event, that behavior began to develop. Now, the premise here is that, and we will be working on this, that if you have a root cause event that's limiting you today, if we can go back and neutralize that event and remove the emotional content associated with that root cause event, then it should make it easier for you to live beyond that limit. It should help that limit evaporate. Okay, so by resolving the root cause event, it will resolve your present day experiences of limitation. Okay, and the next one is one that I call the social binder. What is it that are things in your social context that limit you? Is there things within your family context? Is it your friends that limit you? Is it your employment? What things, based on how you interact with your social environment, what things limit you? So you can play with this one. Now, I didn't talk about specifically how to neutralize these social binders, but if there's a social binder that you feel is really limiting you, you have all the tools present, such as using power frames and planning and being prepared. And if you know that certain social groups limit you, maybe you can either avoid those groups, or when you are challenged to have to be in those groups, maybe there are things that you can recall inside, i.e. power frames, to counteract that pressure to conform to the group. Okay, so those are some great examples that you can play with. Be sure to do these exercises with a pen or a pencil, or in some way update your journal, because there's a lot of information here that could very easily, you just can't remember everything. And I find that writing has another effect too. When I actually physically write something down or enter something into a journal, it actually reinforces it in my memory. Okay, so that's exercise 11. Please have fun with it and reach out to me if you have questions. Hello and welcome to bonus topic 10. This is a series of short videos on selected topics related to the introduction to meditation and the introduction to the internal map of reality. Today's topic is something that I'm calling bilateral movement, and this was mentioned in the session on left-right brain balance, and also mentioned in frequencies of the brain. The bilateral movement is, and if you just do an internet search for bilateral movement or movements, you'll get all kinds of information. But the basic idea is that the movement should utilize as much of your nervous system in a systematic and balanced way to promote cerebral health. I'm going to reference something that I've been doing for many, many, many years as a form of applied meditation, which is something called Tai Chi and Qi Kung. Now, these are English spellings of Chinese words, so you might see some variation of the word Qi or Gi. But I chose to go with the spelling. Tai Chi is basically a movement centered around Kung Fu, and Qi Kung is a little bit more flexible, isn't necessarily martial art oriented at all. However, Tai Chi and Qi Kung have something in common. It's the word Qi, which loosely translates to the word energy. And what energy would we be moving? It would be the energy that we move whenever we do anything with our bodies. We instantly move energy through our bodies to create movement. And this energy originates in our nerve plexus centers, and those of you who study yoga will know them as well. Yoga is another form of bilateral movement, and there are others, but I'm going to focus on Tai Chi and Qi Kung. Now, Tai means, roughly translated, peace. Qi means energy. And Qi Gong, Qi means energy again, and Gong means work. So you can either be doing something to generate a peaceful energy with Tai Chi or to actually work your energy. Then we'll look at the benefits. We'll look at what's mandatory, what are the mandatory components to be considered a Qigong or a Tai Chi type exercise. And we'll look at postures, standing and sitting. And then finally, I'll introduce the first few moves of Tai Chi, and then I'll end it with a little guided instruction so you can follow along with me to do the movements at home. So Tai Chi, Qigong have something in common. They are movements which are done traditionally very slowly. And the reason you do them slowly, as I've referenced before, is because we're working with the parasympathetic nervous system. And that nervous system is the peripheral, and it is considered the rest and digest aspect of your nervous system. So we're working with that, and it works slower than the fast, instantaneous, reactive, sympathetic nervous system. So we're trying to stimulate this relaxation and the slower frequencies by literally moving slower. So it lowers the frequencies of your whole body and your brain. You do the movements soft, and the reason you do your movements soft is that you want to cultivate that quality. There's no need for hard stretches, no need for hard movements of any kind. When you want to do that, you can do that. But everything is soft. Now, why would we do that? Because you're training the nervous system to work with the least amount of energy. So it's the economy of it. It's the elegance of it. So you're doing these movements slowly with the minimal amount of energy. And the soft energy, considered more to be yin-like, is receptive. So in a sense, when you do these slow, soft movements, you will be receiving more energy than you are putting out. And finally, the movements have to be meditative, have to be thoughtful. These are not movements that you can do with a pair of headsets on listening to some music, right? You need to be as focused as you possibly can on the slowness of the movement, of the softness of the movement. You can visualize, create visual frames of this movement being soft. I sometimes tell people to think of the softest thing possible. Imagine moving, say, a soft cloud of energy, very, very soft. You need that constant awareness. So 3 components: soft, slow, and thoughtful. Now, there are specific benefits from doing Tai Chi, and I'll just go through them. These are not necessarily in order. What will happen if you have, say, take the first one, an issue with balance, that will be the first thing that you will begin to work with. However, if your major need is circulatory issues, that will be the first thing that your body will begin to work on. So these are different orders of priority depending on your individual condition. Balance is improved. And if you notice the person sitting there in the chair, that their head's centered on their shoulders and the shoulders are centered above their hips, and all that weight is going through the chair, into the legs, into the floor. So this balance is very important for the health and benefit of your internal organs. Circulatory is improved because when you do these movements slowly and softly, isn't that the way you move fluid? If you want to move a fluid, say you want to create a wave in your bathtub or in your sink, you slowly move the hand through the water, right? The fast-moving hand through the water creates little chippy waves, but a slow-moving, forceful hand will create a big wave. So this is moving vast volumes of water, fluid, blood through your body. The flexibility is increased because you are really, really doing this slowly and with the minimum amount of force, your body opens up. Your joints naturally relax and open up, and you will gain increased flexibility and circulation. This is all related to being relaxed, and the word relaxation is quite often misunderstood. And if you recall back to our unit on the relaxation response, you'll know that it's a balance of your two nervous systems, your parasympathetic, which is your rest and digest mode, and your sympathetic, which is your attack and defend mode. So there's no need to be in the fight or flight mode all of the time. If you are, there are specific conditions, medical conditions, that are created when you are constantly in this high stress fight or flight mode. You want to be in the relaxed and digest mode, which is the parasympathetic mode. So this movement, by doing them slowly, softly, and with lots of thought, creates this relaxation. Very powerful. Your concentration is increased because during these periods of doing the Tai Chi or Qigong, you're very focused, you're very relaxed. You're actually training your whole nervous system how to be focused and concentrated. This is considered a brain challenge exercise. These bilateral movements that you use your whole body to do challenge the neuron networks of your brain. And some of you, for the first time when you start doing these, will get this, what I call this frustration moment, when your face gets flushed and you get kind of like this feeling that I can't do it, it's too hard. That's actually when your brain is generating new neural pathways. So the frustration that you might feel when you're doing yoga or Tai Chi or Qigong, because of these movements are demanding that you move in a certain slow and relaxed way, this feeling, this frustration you feel, is actually a brain challenge when you are actually in the process at that moment of creating new neural pathways. And finally, now there are other benefits, but these are the ones I want to highlight. It's a meditation. This is a meditation that I do every day. And the more you practice either the Tai Chi or Qigong movements, the more you will be able to move into the deeper state of relaxation. So, how do we do it? Well, if you do these Tai Chi or Qigong movements, you have to have these three ingredients, and I've already mentioned them. It is considered to be a meditative movement, a bilateral movement, when you are moving your whole body in a slow, rhythmic way. When the movements are not using vast amounts of energy, when they're using the minimal amount of energy possible and are soft, the joints are open, your whole body is relaxed and open and soft. And here, again, the final ingredient, and if you watch someone doing Tai Chi or Qigong, you'll notice how focused they are. They are doing the movements as accurately as possible. I sometimes tell people, think of how accurately and how specific your body is designed. The body is designed in such a way that all of the joints, all of the connective tissue, all of the muscles, all of the internal organs are all nice, neatly packed and organized, and it's in a very specific location. A doctor knows exactly where the nerves in your body are located. A massage therapist knows exactly where to massage when you have a particular ailment. An acupuncturist knows exactly where to place the needles, and they're pinpoint. They're extremely accurate. So these movements, again, mandatory. They must be slow, they must be soft, and they must be at the highest level of accuracy that you can muster. So here's your first thing that you can do for a meditative Qigong or Tai Chi is learning to stand. So as you see in this picture, this person's standing upright in a relaxed way. Both feet are on the floor. The weight is balanced between both feet. Shoulders relaxed. Your arms and hands are relaxed. In this picture, the person has their hands around their abdomen, but you can let your hands just relax by your side and just gently hang with your palms open. The chest, and this is an area I notice a lot of people, they have a lot of tension in the chest. That is just relaxed where the area where the thymus and the heart are. They just relax that whole area, right? Now, I recommend, because I come from the Qigong Tai Chi world, to do this with your eyes open, although you can do it with your eyes closed. But using the martial art phrase, it really isn't a great idea to do a martial art with your eyes closed. Okay, but you can have them closed if you want. But generally speaking, just relaxed, a relaxed gaze. The same way you would use your eyes when you're doing the meditation, the detachment meditation with your eyes open. Just a gentle, relaxed gaze. Focus very, very gently on something about eye distance, about eye level, slightly downward. Okay. A big one I notice with people, they tend to lock their knees. So make sure your knees are unlocked. And if you want, you can slightly let the knees bend just a little tiny bit, like a quarter of an inch. Just let your knees open up. So there's no blocks. None of your joints are blocking the flow of qi through your body. You are basically doing the detachment meditation that we've done all along. Every session, we've done the 1 minute detachment meditation. That's basically what you're doing, but you're doing it standing. You can also do it in a sitting posture position. And here you see both people, one standing, one sitting. And this is sometimes called the wheelchair set. So you can do all of these movements sitting or standing. It doesn't matter. You get the same benefit, if not more. Some people find the sitting posture movements harder to do than the standing one. Okay, so what are the first movements? So what you'll be learning in this bonus topic 10 is these movements. It's called commencement. You see the person standing in the standing position with the feet relatively close together, arms by their sides. The first thing they do is they gently open up their feet so that they're balanced. The feet are basically under the shoulder joints. So if you look at the shoulder joint and the feet, it's that called shoulder width apart. Not really wide apart, but the feet should be under your shoulders. So your shoulders, your hip joint, and your foot should all be in a line. Then the first movement you do is you let both hands float up with the palms facing down, and then you gently relax all your weight back down into your foot and let your hands come down. So what we will do now, we will do these movements. I have a little video, so you can just watch along. I will do the movement first, and then I'll be instructing the student how to do the movement. So enjoy. Commencement.
预备
Okay, with feet parallel, shoulder width apart. And you want to make sure that your feet are actually parallel. Good. Weight dropping into your feet, shoulders relaxed. Both arms float up, palms facing down. About heart height. At this point, relax your knees, relax your elbows, and push down on your palms. Push down on your palms. Well, thank you for participating in Premiere number 8 tonight. And for those in the Patreon, I will be sending you a separate video on exercise 11, so you can keep your eye open for that. And then, of course, on Sunday, we'll do a short preview of the upcoming sessions. Remember, if you have any questions, please feel free to contact me at any time. Have a great week, and again, thank you for participating.